Hi, hello, what's up? Welcome to Tax Ladder. Today we'll continue our series of revision lectures. We're going to discuss valuation under GST. My name is Shivakant and I'm a chartered accountant. Let us move forward quickly. First, the main important section for us to discuss is section 15. Section 15 tells us what should be included in the value of supply and what should not be. First, let us look at what section 15 subsection 1 is. 15 subsection 1 tells us the value of supply of goods or services shall be the transaction value, which is the price paid or payable for the supply of goods or services, where price is the sole consideration and the transaction is between two unrelated persons. So normally the price will be the transaction value. The value of supply will be the transaction value. Transaction value is nothing but the price paid or payable if two conditions are satisfied. What are those? If the transaction is between two unrelated persons and price is the sole consideration. If these two conditions are satisfied, the valuation would be the transaction value, which is nothing but the price paid or payable for supply of such goods or services. So what if price is not the sole consideration, I give a car along with some money. So here price is not the sole consideration. There is some consideration in kind, or I do some other activity for him to supply the service to me. So this is a case where price is not the sole consideration. Then it is given under valuation rules that we'll discuss after. But the transaction value will apply only when price is the sole consideration, and the second is the transaction is between two unrelated persons. If it is between two related persons, then there is a different method of valuation that should be opted. All right. So that is what 15 subsection 1 says. Simple final conclusion. If price is the sole consideration, yes. Is the transaction between unrelated person? Yes. Then the value is the transaction value, which is nothing but the price paid or payable for supply of goods or services. Now let us look at 15 subsection 2. What does it say? It gives me what are the inclusions in the value of supply, and we'll look at it one by one. TDCF, tax, duties, cess and fees, charges levied under any law for the time being in force other than GST law. So let us say I bring goods from one state to this state. The toll charges will be levied on the transporter in between. So the toll charges is not a tax levied under the GST law. It is as per some other law which goes to the government. Let us say I go to the Secunderabad Cantonment Board. Some kind of local transport tax is levied because I cross the cantonment. In that case also, that amount paid would be included in the value because it says so. Taxes, duties, cesses, fees and charges levied. So any sort of tax, cess, duty which is levied other than a levy under the GST law. So this GST compensation cess on any previous purchase should not be included in the value because he will be getting credit of that. So there is no need for double taxation under GST. The main purpose for bringing it is no double taxation. So let us look at any amount which the supplier is liable to pay in relation to such supply which has been incurred by the recipient. So any amount which the supplier is required to pay, which has been incurred by the recipient of supply. So I am the supplier. So what am I supplying? I am supplying as per the contract between us. The contract is for delivery of the goods till his place of business. So until the delivery has happened and it is delivered at his place of business, the contract is not complete. The supply is not complete. So whose liability is it to deliver that? It is my liability. Because the contract is framed in such a manner that I have to deliver the goods to his place of business, only then the contract is finished, only then the supply is said to have taken place. So in this case, the transport charges from my factory to his factory is my responsibility. It is my liability. So that has to be included in the value of supply normally because I transport it. So what if the contract says it is my liability, but that recipient only brings his truck to our factory and he takes the goods himself? In this case, the liability is mine, but still he does it. He does the transport himself. So the value, the notional value of transport, even though I've not incurred it, should be added to the value. So that is what this is. Any amount which the supplier is liable to pay in relation to such supply which has been incurred by the recipient. Incidental expenses like commission, packing charges, any amount charged for anything done by the supplier in respect of supply of goods or services before or at the time of delivery of goods or supply of services. Incidental expenses like packing charges for delivery of goods. Let us take food delivery for example. Is the packing charges not included in the Swiggy delivery that you take? His charges a separate amount. So that packing charges is incidental to the supply of food. So that is also to be included in the value of supply. Not just by Swiggy, but even if you go to a restaurant directly and if he levies packing charges, you should not say that it does not form part of the value. Because section 15 subsection 2 says so. Packing, because this is incidental to the supply, so it has to be included. And any amount charged for anything done by the supplier in relation to supply of goods or services before or at the time of delivery of goods or supply of services. Anything done by the supplier. You could name anything which he does, that should be included in the value of supply. Let us say before the supply, he puts an additional condition that, all right, after packing, you put some kind of ribbon on the package, so that because this is a gift for my friend. So this is something that he is doing before the supply, before the delivery. I am doing this. So the value of whatever I am doing should be included in the value of supply. But remember, the key thing is anything done before the or at the time of supply of goods. Before the supply is finished, I have to do that activity, whatever it is. So the value of that and any amount charged, if I charge something, so I charge for the ribbon that I put on the packet. So that is also something that is being charged. So it will clearly fall under here. Any amount charged for anything done in respect of supply of goods or services before or at the time of delivery of goods or supply of services. All right. Interest, late fee, penalty for delayed payment of consideration for supply. What is this? So let us say I supply 50 bags of rice and say that by next month 20th you have to pay me 2 lakhs rupees for the entire 50 bags of rice. So if you do not pay within 20th of next month, I will charge a late fee of 25,000. So this normally one would think is in the nature of financial transaction because it is for late payment, but no, as per GST law 15 subsection 2, this late charges, interest, penalty, by whatever name you call it, for delayed payment of consideration. So the nature of the transaction should be interest, late fees, penalty, or for delayed payment of the consideration only. Only delayed payment of consideration is included in this. So any late fee, interest charge for loan default is not included here. Delayed payment of consideration is only what he means here. Anything else do not include it in the value of supply. So that 25,000 of late fee or penalty should be included in the value of supply of goods. But the time of supply, remember, when we discussed in the time of supply, will be the date of payment of the interest, late fee or penalty. It is not the 20th of next month or the date of issue of invoice. It is whenever that guy pays me the 25,000. It is whenever that guy pays me the 25,000. That is the time of supply. That is when I include it in the value of supply, and that is the month for which I show it in my GST return. All right. So subsidies linked to the price excluding subsidies provided by the central government or state government. So what about subsidies linked to the price? So what is subsidy linked to the price? Let us say I am manufacturing stationery for the benefit of the poor. Normally the intention would be to keep the price as low as possible. So 10 rupees pen, I would be intending to supply it at 4 rupees only. So the government says, I'll give you an incentive of 6 rupees per pen. This is the subsidy that the government is giving. So the subsidy that the government is giving is directly linked to the price of the pen. 6 rupees it is giving. So this 6 rupees will not be included in the value of supply if it is provided by the government and if it is linked to the price. Other than that, any other kind of subsidy, if it is not linked to the price, if it is not linked to the price and provided by a private party, these CSR expenditure some people are incurring for the benefit of poor. So in that manner, if it comes to you from a private party, it has to be included in the value. All right. Only a subsidy provided by the central government or state government, and that too it has to be linked to the price. If those two conditions are satisfied, then it has to be excluded from the value. Otherwise, any kind of subsidy, you just straightforward include. So let us move forward. 15 subsection 3. What does 15 subsection 3 say? Value of supply shall not include. Now 15 subsection 1 talks of what actually the valuation should be, transaction value, if the two conditions of unrelation and price is the sole consideration are satisfied. Okay, 15.2 says what are the inclusions. 15.3 subsection 3 says what are the exclusions. So let us look at 15 subsection 3. It shall not include any discount. This is very crucial for a practical point of view as well as for any sort of discount. You have to look at these two conditions. First condition, is it given before or at the time of supply, which has been indicated in the invoice, or is it given after the supply? The first question you should ask is it before the supply or is it after the supply? In what is the time of supply? Go to time of supply chapter. The first question you should ask is it before time of supply or after time of supply? You would have answered that question. So if it is before the time of supply, is it indicated in the invoice that has been given? So if you, let us say, you go to any stationery shop, normally this Asia Law House or some big showrooms are there, where the discount is printed on the invoice that is given to you. So this is a clear before or at the time of supply discount, and the condition for you to exclude the discount from the value is, if it is given before or at the time of supply, is it has to be shown in the invoice separately. Alright, if that is done, discount should be excluded from the value. Let us say 1500 you purchase the GST law book, alright, as amended by the Finance Act. So he gives a discount of 200 rupees, which is specified minus 200 on the invoice. So this is being given before or at the time of supply. This is clearly being shown in the invoice, then excluded from the value. And the amount on which GST has to be paid is 1300 rupees, 1500 minus 200. Alright. So what if the discount is given after supply? Now there are certain conditions that need to be satisfied. What are those? One, discount has to be given as part of the terms of agreement entered into before or at the time of supply, which can be linked to the invoice. The recipient has reversed the ITC on such discount. So these three conditions need to be satisfied for discount to be excluded from the value. What are those three? So the discount that is being given is part of the terms of an agreement entered into before or at the time of supply. So at least I want something which is there before or at the time of supply. There has to be some link. Otherwise, I will not allow discount to be reduced from the value, because it is a loss to the government. When the value is reduced, GST will come less to the government. So I don't want that to happen. So at least I want something, some kind of proof which dates back to the time of supply or before the time of supply. So there has to be an agreement. It has to be part of the terms or agreement entered into before or at the time of supply. That is first condition. Two, it has to be linked to the invoice, or it has to be capable of being linked to the invoice. What does that mean? Let us say 50 cartons of beer I purchase. 50 cartons of beer I purchase. And later he says, I'll give you a discount of 2% if you purchase 50 more cartons in the next 2 months. I'll give a discount of 2% flat on all the purchases that you've made if you buy 50 more cartons in the upcoming 2 months. So that is the discount. So can this discount be linked to the price? Yes, it is clearly, it could be linked to the price. So let us say 50 cartons, I give one invoice. One invoice, 50 cartons, let us say it is about 5 lakh rupees. 5 lakh rupees. So the 2% can be directly linked to the invoice. That means 2% of the total invoice value is the discount. If it can be related to the invoice, then I allow the discount. So this is condition number 2. It has to be linked to the invoice. So what are cases where it cannot be linked to the invoice? Cases like I'll give you 10,000 discount. Alright, 10,000 rupees I'll give discount. So there's no relation here. There's no percentage specified. Understand? So this is something which could be said to be not related to the invoice. Or what if he gives a discount in a manner of non-monetary? He gives you a tour of the whole Asia. This is something I cannot relate to an invoice, right? So this is also, this kind of discount can also not be, this kind of promotion cannot be linked to the invoice. So I do not allow it as deduction from the value. Understand? So the recipient has reversed the input tax credit on such discount. So alright, I sell the goods. I sell the goods. Later I give discount to someone else. So when I sell the goods for let us say 10,000 rupees and later I give a 2,000 discount, he would have taken input credit on the purchase that he makes for 10,000 rupees. He would have taken ITC and he would have utilized ITC. Now later when I give a discount of 2,000 rupees, he is very happy because he got the credit of ITC on 2,000 rupees and he is again getting benefit of the 2,000 transaction value also. So he is getting double benefit here. He has actually not paid 2,000 rupees because he is getting it back in the form of discount. And he is getting credit for the 2,000 also. So that should not be there, right? It is a loss to the government again. So one final condition that the government has put is that person to whom you have sold has to reverse the credit to the extent of discount. Only then I will allow you to exclude it from the value. So what I do practically is I issue a credit note to the other person with GST. So based on this, he reverses his credit, and even my GSTR 3B would also be revised to the extent. I will show the credit note in the month in which I issue. Alright. So finally, 3 conditions to be satisfied are, what are those? The discount has to be as part of the, at least something has to be there which is in relation to at the time of supply or before. So there has to be at least some kind of terms or agreement which relates to the time of supply or before that. Alright, it could be clearly related to the invoice. It can be linked to the invoice, the discount. The other person has reversed the credit. So these 3 conditions. If these are satisfied, then even after supply, if I give a discount, then it can be excluded from the value of supply. Alright. This is very important for every practical transaction. You have to ask 2 questions. Is it before the time of supply or at the time of supply? Or is it after time of supply? If it is before the time of supply, is it being shown in the invoice? Yes, then exclude it from the value. After time of supply, then look at 3 conditions. What are those? Is it as part of an agreement or terms entered into before or at the time of supply? Yes. Then look at the next condition. What is the, can it be related to the invoice? Yes, tick it off. Then the recipient, has the recipient reversed the credit? Yes, then exclude it from the value. So for every nature of discount, you have to look at these 3 conditions. Now, TCS charged is excluded from the value as it is in the nature of interim levy and not having the character of tax. So what does this mean? You go to a gold shop, you buy some 5 lakhs worth of gold. Let us say 10 lakhs worth of gold you purchase. On the invoice, apart from the 3% GST, let us say 10 lakhs plus 3% GST, which is 30,000, 10 lakh 30,000 plus TCS he charges, not GST TCS, income tax TCS. He charges TCS of, I think, income tax 1% TCS. So 1% he charges on not the GST value, he charges on the invoice value, on the 10 lakhs. 10 lakhs of 1% is 10,000. So the question is, should the value on which GST is charged should include the 10,000 TCS or not? See, the TCS is not any amount being paid for the gold purchased. It is just an interim levy wherein it is just being collected from the taxpayer and it is paid back to the taxpayer at the time of taking credit, just to have an audit trail. So it is in the nature of interim levy, a circular issued by CBIC said. So it should not be included in the value, or it should be excluded from the value. Alright, the treatment of molds, dies supplied by an original equipment manufacturer to the component manufacturer depends on the liability. If OEM is responsible to supply, then it is not included in the value. If the component manufacturer has to procure the molds and use it, then it should be included in the value of supply. Now this is similar to section 15 subsection 2 clause B, as we've discussed. Any amount which the supplier is liable to pay in relation to the supply which has been incurred by the recipient. So here the supplier is component manufacturer. So whose liability is it to get the molds and dies? Molds and dies are nothing but small equipment which help in the betterment of the product. Like if you are manufacturing doing some carpentry work, then just some finishing tools like making it smooth. So that tool is nothing but a mold. It could be a form of mold. It is not exactly a mold. That is one of the things that you could describe what a mold is. All right. So whose responsibility is it? That is the first question. If it is the responsibility of the supplier to use the molds and dies, and it is provided by the recipient, then it has to be added in the value. So it is simply a question of whose liability is it. If the original equipment manufacturer is responsible to supply it, then it is not included in the value. If the component manufacturer has to procure the molds and use it, then it should be included in the value of supply as per 15 subsection 2 clause B. Now what about sales promotion? Buy more, save more. As I told you, for any kind of discount or sale promotion, you have to look at section 15 subsection 3. Is it before the time of supply? Is it after the time of supply? Look at the three conditions if it is after time of supply. These three are mostly after time of supply. So buy more, save more. As I told you, the cartons of beer, if you purchase more, I'll give you a discount for the previous purchase also, I say. So it is, if it is as part of the terms and conditions entered into before or at the time of supply, yes, has he reversed the ITC? Can it be linked to the invoice? Look at that. If those are satisfied, then exclude it from the value, otherwise include it in the value. Periodic year-end discounts. Sometimes what happens, these big Reliance Industries and all, if I make purchase from Reliance Industries in relation to telecommunication equipment, so it looks at the year end who has made the most purchase from us. So to them they give discounts of in bulk amounts, like they give 1 lakh rupees discount. They just credit it into my account. So this cannot be linked to the invoice. First thing, and also this is, I do not know if this Reliance will give me a discount also. It is not as per the terms or agreements entered into before. So generally it is excluded from the value because the conditions are not being satisfied. Secondary discounts are just random discounts given, or you could also say some sales promotion. So look at the three conditions always. If it is not satisfied, then exclude it from the value. Then include it in the value. If the conditions are satisfied, exclude it from the value. Look at the rules. Why are they significant? Now we looked at section 15 subsection 1. It said transaction value should be taken where price is the sole consideration and the transaction is between two unrelated persons. So what if the price is not the sole consideration? If price is not the sole consideration, we have to apply rule 27. If the transaction is between two related persons, then we have to apply rule 28. Alright, let us look at 27. The first thing is, always the government relies on the open market value. That is what I believe in, not what you say, not what you charge. First, for every kind of rule, it is the open market value. What is everyone doing? What is the normal market value if I purchase it outside? So first look at the open market value. If it is not available, it is a unique product that only this company manufactures, then consideration in money. So let us say I'm selling an old car and buying a new car. So this is a consideration. Let us assume that the open market value is not there. So I'm selling an old car and buying a new one. So the consideration in money. So what am I? So let us say the new car, the old car I'm selling it for 3 lakhs rupees and I'm getting a new car for it. So I'm giving off a car worth 3 lakh rupees and additionally I'm paying 7 lakh rupees. So the value that should be taken is the consideration in money. Alright, the consideration in money is 7 lakh rupees I'm paying in cash. The money value of consideration not in money. So what is the monetary value of consideration not in money? The old car is the consideration not in money, and what is the value of that? 3 lakhs. So the consideration in money is 7 lakhs plus the money value of consideration not in money. So that is 3 lakhs, 7 lakhs plus 3 lakhs, which is 10 lakh rupees. So that is how I value. Now if this is also not possible, the value of supply of goods of the like kind and quality. So the goods that are similar in all respects. So the value of supply of goods, let us say similar goods I have to take. Let us say I am buying a Verna car. So similar to it is a Honda, let us say Hyundai Verna, the competitor is some Honda Civic or something. So what is the value of that car? If possible, look at the similar segment of the same company. So in that manner, you calculate what is the value of goods of the like kind and quality at the time when I'm actually selling it. So at that time I have to value. At that time, what is the value of supply of the like goods of like kind or quality? Not after 1 year, not after, before 1 month. So at that time, what is the value of goods of like kind and quality? That value I take. If open market value is not available, if I'm unable to find out the consideration in money plus money value of consideration not in money, so I'm unable to find out, then opt for value of supply of goods of like kind and quality. Finally, apply rule 30. What is rule 30? Rule 30 says that 110% of the cost incurred by you, that is the value. Flat, it says that 110% of the cost of production or whatever the cost is that you've incurred, that is the value. If you are unable to find out by any of these three, then go for cost of production into 110%. So if you are unable to find out the cost of production also, then apply rule 31. 31 says that apply any consistent means, any reasonable means you apply. What is reasonable in your industry you apply. For services it is different. For manufacturing industry it is different. You apply some reasonable basis, but apply it consistently, and it should be in adherence with section 15. All right. So do whatever you want, opt some reasonable basis, but do it in consensus with section 15 and other rules. All right. That is the final resort. For services, an option is given saying that you need not apply rule 30 also. Go to rule 31 directly. All right. Rule 27 is applicable when the consideration is not wholly in money. Now what about when the transaction happens between two related persons? So if it is between two related persons, I come here. As I told you, first the government believes only in the open market value, always open market value. Here obviously this will not be there because it is not a consideration in money case kind of thing. So you directly go to the third case. It is same, value of supply of goods of the like kind or quality at the time of supply. If it is not available, then apply rule 30 and 31. Now at my option, if I am the supplier supplying to a related person, I can ignore all of this. This 3 I need not consider. So if I am selling it to my brother, let us say my own brother, or my wife I am selling, even though I am not married. So I'm selling it to my wife, and she is selling it to someone. She is also intending to trade in this good, and she is selling it to someone unrelated. So the rule 28 says, what is that, how much is the value at which that person is selling to an unrelated person, take that value and take 90% of that value as your value. So where the goods are intended for further supply by the recipient, then 90% of the price charge for supply of goods of the like kind and quality by the recipient to his customer, not being a related person. So 90% of what my related person is selling to that unrelated person, that is what my value should be. I can ignore all of this and take this as the value. Now one more condition that overtakes anything else is, so when the recipient is getting input credit, then whatever I raise an invoice would be the value, even though he's an unrelated person. So let us say 10,000 worth of goods, I am raising an invoice for 100 rupees only. So I am underselling it, but still I am raising 100 rupees and I am charging GST. That guy is able to take input credit. So in that case, okay, there's no problem. The value, whatever you say in the invoice, will be the price that you can opt. The government says this because the government has trust in the other person, because he is able to take credit or he's taking credit, then he'll be losing credit, right? Anyway, at the next stage, tax will come to the government. So I don't bother. That is what the government says. So ultimately, to sum up rule 28, for everything open market value, because, and what is the value of supply of like goods of like kind and quality at the time of supply. So if you have an option to opt for 90% of the value at which the person to whom you sell is selling to an unrelated person, 90% of that value will be your value. And if that person is eligible to take credit, then whatever you show it in the invoice can be considered as the value. I will not ask any other question, says the government, because he has reliance on that other person. At some stage or the other, my tax will come, says the government. So this is 27 and 28. Now 29, supply between a principal and agent. So as I told you before, it is an open market value. At the option of supplier, now at the option of supplier be 90% of the price charged for supply of goods of like kind or quality by the recipient to his customer, not being a related person, where the goods are intended for further supply by the said recipient. Alright, only two cases here. Either the open market value, or generally the agent takes the goods for further sale, right? So at what price is he selling at? At what price is that agent selling it to an unrelated person? 90% of that value, you take the value. So this is a unique condition where a principal agent relationship is there. Every time you have to check whether this is being followed or not, because generally principal agent, the charging is very less. So wherever there is a principal agency relationship, so if you look at the definition of an agent is a person, a delegatory agent, commission agent, by whatever name called, who facilitates the supply of goods or services but does not make a supply on his own account. So that is who an agent is. So if a principal agent relationship is there, look at it if this is happening or not. All right. Now rule 30, as I've already told you, 110% of cost of production or manufacture or cost of provision of service. Residual method, final method, if no option is available to me, I am unable to find out the value as per any of the preceding rules, then go for 31. Reasonable means consistent with the principles of 15. For supply of services, one may opt directly rule 31 instead of going for rule 30 and then coming to 31. All right. Let us look at valuation in certain special cases. For each type of business, there is a different method of valuation specified. So let us look at it one by one quickly. So rule 31A. So what is the, how do I value actionable claims? Like we all know that actionable claims are included in the definition of goods. So schedule 3 again specifies that actionable claims other than lottery, betting, gambling are outside the purview of, are neither goods nor services. So only lottery, betting, gambling are treated as supply of goods and which are to be looked at. So how do I value all of these three? Let us look at it now. The state-run lottery, wherein the tickets cannot be sold in any other state other than organizing state, the value is the face value of ticket or price declared in the official gazette, whichever is higher. So what does this mean? So state authorized lottery means lottery is authorized to be sold in states other than the organizing state. Value of supply in case of supply of actionable claim in the form of betting, gambling, horse racing shall be 100% of the face value of the bet or amount paid to the totalizer. So it's very simple. If a state is actually organizing the lottery, a state is running the lottery, that means the tickets cannot be sold in any other state. If that is the case, the whole and soul is being taken care of by the state. Let us say Kerala government does it a lot. The state run lottery, a benefit should be given, right? Because it is being run by the state and no private parties are being involved, the tax rate is usually less. So I consider the value of ticket as inclusive of tax and reverse calculate. All right, I treat for state lottery the rate is less, 12%. So that is why the total value is considered as 112 rupees and I find the face value. So the valuation is done by face value of ticket or price declared in the official gazette, whichever is higher, divided by, because it is state run lottery which cannot be sold in any other state, the rate will be less. I consider it as 12%. Divided by 112 into 100, that will be the value. In case of state organized lottery, that means, okay, the state has started it, but it can be sold in any other state also. So I put the highest rate of tax which could be possibly put, that is 28%. So I consider it as inclusive of tax and take it as 100 by 128%. So 100 would be the value of ticket. It will be the highest of the price, the face value of the ticket or the price declared in the official gazette, whichever is higher, into 100 by 128. Remember, state run lottery wherein it cannot be sold in any other state, the price is less because whole and soul is being taken care of by the state, which is 12%. So it will be into 100 by 112. So if it is a state organized lottery which could be sold in any other state, the rate will be the highest, into 100 by 128. So what are the valuation rules in case of other kind of actionable claim? Betting, cricket betting, even though it is illegal, cricket betting, match fixing, horse racing. So the value is the entire amount that is pooled. So let us say all the bets together amount to 20 crore rupees all over the country. So the value on which GST would be levied is 20 crore rupees. What is pooled up is the, in case of horse racing, all the bets are collected by the totalizer, right? So the amount that is pooled by the totalizer is the value of supply. So value of supply in case of actionable claim in the form of betting, gambling, horse racing shall be 100% of the face value of the bet or the amount paid to the totalizer. Now rule 32. What is the valuation criteria in case of a money changer or a currency converter. So we have this Western Union money transfers. All these private parties are also there. A Zen money transfer. All of these are coming up. This is a booming business actually. So how do those people carrying on those business value their services of money changing? So let us take a French franc is being converted into Indian rupees. All right. So I have French francs. I want Indian rupees. So what do? I go to Zen Money and convert it. So I am selling it to him. That guy is buying it. So he uses the buying rate. So buying rate for him, consider it from his point of view always. So the buying rate for him, let us say 72 rupees he pays me. So that is his buying rate. So buying rate minus the RBI reference rate. The RBI reference rate is put generally either periodically, either weekly or monthly. So based on that, I take the buying rate 72 rupees minus the RBI reference rate. So that would be his margin per French franc. Alright. So that is what the value of his services. The margin that he earns is actually the value of service. Fair enough. So in case RBI reference rate is not available, then 1% of the gross amount of Indian. So in this case, the RBI reference rate, as I told you, is given periodically. I am unable to find out the RBI reference rate exactly for the currency. Maybe it is a very unique currency that I am trading in. So what I do is 1% of the gross amount of Indian rupees received by the money changer. Alright. So let us say this unique currency I have, I want to sell it to the money changer. So what is, I don't have the RBI reference rate with me. So whatever amount he receives in Indian rupees, so something he would be receiving, right? When he converts it, something he would be receiving. So that amount into 1%. So he's assuming 1% will be his margin on the total turnover. 1% would be his margin. That is what he's assuming, and that is what he considers it as the value of supply of service, where the currencies that are being exchanged are both in foreign currency. Then 1% of the lowest of both the currencies converted in Indian rupees as per RBI reference rate. So what does this mean? I am converting Swiss dollar into French franc. So there is no Indian rupees involved. So I want to convert Swiss dollar into French franc with Zen money in India. So what he does is he takes Swiss dollar from me and gives me French franc. There is no Indian rupees involved. So how do I cannot use these two rules. Now what happens is the government says, rule 32 says, convert both of these into Indian rupees. Or convert both of these into Indian rupees. There must be Indian rupee conversion rate somewhere with him. So if he converts the French franc into Indian rupees at this moment when the sale is happening, the money changer would get some rupees, right? So what is that? And take the other Swiss dollar, convert it into Indian rupees. What would he get? So 1% of the Indian rupees amount for both you do. What is the lowest? That is what the value of supply is. Lowest of both the currencies, that is the value of supply. Alright. Now he can either opt for this mode or this mode. So this says that up to 1 lakh rupees of transactions, it is 1%. Let us say the total amount of currency exchanged in this whole month for me is 1 lakh rupees. So what is the value on which I need to pay GST for the next month? So 1% of the total value, 90,000 rupees worth of conversions I've done. So 90,000 into 1%, which is 90 rupees, right? 90 rupees subject to a minimum of 250 rupees. 90,000 into 1% is 900 rupees. So 900 rupees I have to pay to the government. So this is a slab rate kind of thing, just like in income tax you have. So it has been given in that manner. So from 1 lakh to 10 lakh rupees, it is 1000, which is nothing but 1 lakh into 1%. So this plus 0.5% of the additional. Let us say I make a trade of 5 lakh rupees worth of transactions I do. So 1000 plus 4 lakh into 0.5%. So it would be 250 rupees, or 4 lakh into 5% would be, I think, 2500 rupees. 1000 plus 2500 rupees. So 3500 rupees I have to pay to the government. So similarly, more than 10 lakh rupees, 5500. So it will be 1000 up to here plus 9 lakhs into 0.5%, which is 4500. So 5500 plus 0.01% of the transactions in excess of 10 lakh rupees. So that will be the amount of, that will be the value on which I have to charge GST. It is not the GST payable, but it is the value on which I charge GST. Alright. So this is also the value on which GST will be charged. Alright. Now simple. In case of an air travel agent, a certain percentage of commission is based on the price of the ticket or the ticket fare. Now for domestic bookings, the value of his supply would be 5% of the basic fare or 10% of the basic fare in case of international bookings. What is the basic fare? The fare based on which his commission is paid. It is very difficult for outsiders to find out what the exact commission that the air travel agents gets, because it is very complicated. So they want to make it easy. Just 5% of the basic fare of the ticket would be the value of your service. 10% of the basic fare, because for international bookings their commission will be more. 10% of the basic fare will be the value of your service, on which the air travel agent needs to pay GST. Alright. Now in case of life insurance business, what is the supply of service? Now let us take LIC has a lot of schemes. Most of them are investment plus life insurance. So let us say 50,000 per annum he charges as LIC premium. This includes some 30% worth of investment scheme. So it tells me that initially only in every 50,000 that you pay every year, 30,000 is going for investment. Before taking the policy at the time of agreement only it tells. Then the value of supply would be only to the extent of the risk amount, which is 50,000 minus 30,000, that is 20,000 is the value of supply of insurance. So gross premium charged from the policy holder less amount set aside for investment savings on behalf of the policy holder intimated at the time of supply. Understood? So the net amount excluding the investment purpose amount that he deducts would be the value of supply, right? Because he is taking risk only for that 20,000. The 30,000 is just investing somewhere. Single annuity premium policies other than the above would be 10% of the single premium charge. Single premium annuity policy is nothing but I pay a bulk amount of 10 lakhs now. Alright, you pay me annually some 20,000 till the end of my life. So that is what the agreement is. On that 10 lakh initial payment I make, this 10% is would be 10% of the single premium paid would be the value of service. Alright. In other cases, apart from this, 25% of the premium would be the value of service in the first year, and 12.5%, half of that from the year ahead, from the second year on, till the end of the policy. Nothing shall apply where the entire premium is for risk cover. Where the entire premium is for risk cover, then the entire premium would be the value of service. Alright. Now this is what it is. Rule 32 sub rule 5. Now what is the case for a second hand dealer? How do I value a dealer of second hand goods? Like Quicker Cars, for example, he buys cars and sells it. He buys it from normal consumers and sells it. So this scheme is available only for a regular dealer. just a one-time purchase. Let us say a company sells its car, so 32 sub rule 5 cannot be applied. Only for a regular dealer in second-hand goods can apply this rule. So quicker cars can apply this rule, provided it does not take input credit on the goods purchased by it. So it purchases a car from a company. The company raises a GST invoice. A normal consumer might not, but a company raises a GST invoice. So he should not avail ITC on that. Only on that condition, he is being given an option to opt for this rule. So what does this rule say on what is the value when he sells it further? What is the value that he needs to opt? It is nothing but the margin that he gets. The selling price minus the purchase price. So that is the value on which he has to charge GST. Alright. A dealer in second hand who has not availed ITC on purchase of goods has an option to value such goods as selling price minus purchase price. If let us say I am selling it at a lesser price than the price at which I purchased, in turn what is happening is I am making a loss. Then no need to pay GST because there is a negative value addition. GST on second hand goods from an unregistered person is exempt. If I purchase from an unregistered person, then it is exempt because remember we've discussed in the supply chapter, a normal person sells a luxury car also. A one-time transaction can also be treated as business. There is no repetition required. So because there was confusion being created, this exemption notification was given. Alright, GST on second hand goods received from an unregistered person is exempt. Alright, even 9.3 and 9.4 would be covered here. Purchase from an unregistered person tax would be payable by the registered person because that has been removed 9.4 anyway now. Anyway, the exemption is still there. Second hand goods are used. Second hand goods are goods which are used, including goods on which minor processing is carried out, which does not change the nature of the goods. So I can make minor processes on that which does not change the nature. Let us say I purchase a car, I cut half of it and put a towing machine on the back so that it becomes a pickup vehicle. So this is completely changing the nature of the vehicle because maybe it adds value. So this should not be done. Minor changes like painting, repairing the steering wheel which is damaged. So those kinds of things are okay, but do not change the nature of that. Will not be coming under second hand goods. All right. So in case of repossessed goods, let us say a bank, SBI, has found out a corporate debtor who has defaulted a loan or an individual who has defaulted a loan. It went to its house and seized its car, his luxury car. Now it wants to sell this luxury car. What is the value for it? The same method needs to be opted. In case of the person from whom repossession is done is an unregistered person, the purchase value for the defaulter less 5% per quarter or part thereof. In case normally the repossession, if it is done from an unregistered person, the value would be, I really don't care because he is unregistered, whatever value at which he purchased less 5% per quarter or part thereof. What is the value now? That is the value on which GST needs to be charged on its further sale. In case defaulter is a registered person, GST is payable on purchase price without reduction of value. So if he is registered, he would have purchased it from a registered person, let us say. He would not have taken ITC because it is blocked. But still, what is the value I opt? I opt only the price at which he purchased, that is the value, that is the purchase value I take. That is the purchase value I take, and even these people are given an option to opt for 32.5 the selling price minus purchase price. The purchase price for them would be the price at which that person from whom I'm taking repossession has paid. That would be their purchase price. So ultimately, sum 32 sub rule 5, a dealer in second hand can only opt for this. However, a person who takes repossession of from a defaulter is also given an option. A dealer who has not taken ITC on the purchase can opt for this 32.5. What is the method of valuation? What is the sale price minus the purchase price? The margin that I get is the value on which GST should be charged. All right. Now, in case of a defaulter, if that guy is an unregistered person, what is the value that I take? What is the purchase price for him minus 4%, 5% per quarter or part thereof? In case defaulter is a registered person, what is the price at which he purchases? That is the price I take as my purchase price. Now let us look at finally a very important chapter or very important rule, rule 33. It talks of pure agent. Now it answers the question, let us say a chartered accountant incorporates a company. It takes incorporation charges of 10,000. So apart from that, he incurs ROC fees, right? Some 2,000 ROC fees need to be paid along with stamp duty for incorporation of a company. So is that 1,500 to be included or 2,000 to be included in the value of 10,000 bill that he raises or not? That is the question. Now it brings us to the concept of a pure agent. Who is a pure agent? Pure agent is a person where an agreement is entered into as a pure agent to incur expenditure on his behalf. The supplier does not intend to hold title to the goods or services procured. The goods or procured are not used for the personal benefit. The person acting as pure agent only receives the actual amount. So the conditions are 4 things that need to be satisfied. There has to be an agreement between me and my client saying that you can incur this expenditure on my behalf. All right, there is an agreement. Maybe it need not be written, but even a verbal contract could be a contract. There's no need for a written agreement there. An agreement should be there. Let us say he says, all right, all the documents are ready for incorporation. Do I need to purchase a file for you and give you? Okay, sir, you purchase a file and bind everything, make a MOA, AOA, or print all the books. I'll reimburse you of the actuals, he says. So this is, I'm purchasing goods, the books, I'm printing everything on his behalf. I don't charge anything extra. So in this case, I do not intend to take ownership of the books that I print on his behalf. I'm just acting as a pure agent. Alright, the intention is the second case. Now, I do not want to use the goods for my benefit. There's no personal interest in the usage of the goods or services that I procure. Alright, it is only for his benefit. And the fourth and final is, I only get reimbursed of the actuals that I incur. These 4 conditions are very crucial to determine whether I'm acting as a pure agent or not. 4, what are those? 1, is there an agreement? Express or implied, it does not matter. Agreement is there. Okay. So, for whose benefit are you incurring the expenditure? Are you using for your personal benefit? Yes or no? Yes, then you are not a pure agent. So, third question, do you intend to hold title? Do you intend to own ownership? I really don't have any intention to get the ownership of the files. I just want to give it to him. Okay, are you getting reimbursement of the actuals? Yes, actuals only. You are a pure agent, pure agent. Now, okay, I know who a pure agent is. Now coming to valuation. All right, this 10,000 is my professional fees plus 2,000 ROC fees plus 2,000 file charges and all. So 14,000 is the total value. Now when will this 4,000 be excluded from my total bill that I raise? Subject to few conditions. only if I act as a pure agent at the time of making payment to the third party. When I make payment to the third party, at that time, the agreement has to be there that I'm a pure agent. So at that time, all these 4 conditions have to be satisfied. When I make the payment, I have to be a pure agent. Yeah, when I make payment to the ROC, the agreement is there. I do not really intend to hold title to the services procured. I'm not utilizing it for my benefit. I only receive actuals. So at that time of making payment, be it to the file person from whom I'm making file purchase or to the ROC, I really am a pure agent at that time. I'm authorized by that person. Yes, I'm authorized to make payment. The amount in the bill that I raised to my client, I should say 10,000 plus 4,000. I have to separately indicate that 4,000. I have to say that amount paid as a pure agent as per rule 33. The supplies are in addition to the, so these are in addition to the services that I give on my own account, incorporation charges. So these are also satisfied. Then exclude those charges from the value of supply. All right. Finally, at the time of exclusion, what are the conditions that you need to check? So, do I act as a pure agent at the time of making payment? Yes. Am I authorized to make the payment from the recipient? Yes, I am authorized. The third, am I separately indicating it in the invoice? Yes, I am separately indicating it in the invoice. Am I providing this in addition to the service that I provide on my own account? Yes, my actual services are incorporation services. This is just something I'm acting as a pure agent. So all these 4 conditions are satisfied, exclude it from the value. All right. So this concludes our discussion about value of supply. Thank you very much.